Right, first at 10, a San Antonio megachurch pastor caught in the middle of his brother's alleged crime.
Jack Hagee is accused of sexually abusing a child for several years. The suspect is the brother of televangelist John Hagee. Eyewitness News reporter Henry Ramos shares new legal insight into this case.
God cannot answer prayer until you pray.
John Hagee, the leader of Cornerstone Church and political muscle for major politicians, tonight is responding to accusations against his younger brother. 74-year-old Jack Hagee is accused of sexually molesting a child for 8 years, starting when she was 5 years old. The arrest affidavit states the abuse happened while he was a constable in Harris County. The victim told investigators the sexual assaults occurred 3 times a week. Investigators say the victim confided in a relative who in turn told Jack Hagee's brother, the televangelist. We've learned the pastor confronted his brother about the allegations over the phone, saying, quote, "Oh my God, Jack," and telling him he is no longer allowed in the preacher's home. Pastor Hagee told investigators his brother admitted to touching the child. A spokesperson for Pastor Hagee offered the following statement, quote, "He and his wife have offered and given their full and unconditional support to the victim, including respecting their decision when to go to law enforcement and also speaking to law enforcement on the victim's behalf," end quote. The victim, now an adult, went to police with the allegations.
We know the woman made an outcry in 2018. The information about this conversation with the minister and then the conversation between the minister and the brother is not dated, so we don't know when that occurred.
Donna Coltharp is an associate professor of law at St. Mary's University.
As a pastor, he should have reported if he reasonably believed that it had happened.
We asked her about the pastor's legal responsibility to report the claims and if he could be criminally charged.
He doesn't have to report unless he believes that a child or a person with an intellectual disability is in danger from this person. I would think that that would be a difficult thing for the state to prove.
And a source close to the investigation tells KENS 5 there were no children living with Jack Hagee at the time this outcry was made. He was released from jail this morning on a combined $65,000 bond, and according to online records, he is due in court next month. Reporting live, Henry Ramos, KENS 5 Eyewitness News.
We have a detailed breakdown of this investigation on KENS5.com and the KENS 5 app.